Well, Carmen, thank you for those words, and ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, one and all. You know, it's an interesting thing that I think probably if you came 100 and whatever number of years ago to the Board of Trade, you wouldn't have found somebody who was a local union executive here at this podium, or introducing the mayor, or being very much a part and a partner with the Board of Trade. And I think it's a measure of how far we've come, and how far we've come to recognize that collaboration is going to take us a long way. In fact, it's going to take us all the way. And I just want to say to you, you don't know very much, many of you, some will, but many won't, about Local 506, or for that matter, Local 183 of the Laborers International Union, or LIUNA as they're called. But it's a model, and everybody should have the chance. I've had to go and visit the Union Hall, where they provide everything for their people in just the way you would should be done for unionized workers. There's help of every kind, scholarship programs, legal help when people need it, and people are just looked after as family members, and I think it's something that we could all take a lesson from. And I know from having run a company myself, and many in this room do, that companies try to do the same thing, but oftentimes it's seen that there's then a sort of an inconsistency between what unions are trying to do and what businesses are trying to do, and I think most of the time they're trying to do exactly the same thing, which is give people productive employment and make sure they're treated well. And if people are treated well and have productive employment, generally speaking, they're going to be happy. But I just want to say, Carmen, thank you for your partnership with the Board of Trade, and Jan, thank you for making sure that there are those kinds of partnerships. I think, and I'm not going to talk, I'm going to talk about something much more granular than what Jan said today, which is about transportation and traffic and transit. But I think that in the context of achieving, you know, that city that stays on top and that takes advantage of that moment in time that we're at right now, where the world is looking at Toronto, that kind of collaboration, that kind of spirit, that kind of treatment of how people are looked after has as much to say about our reputation in the world. I know from, I mean, Jan made it sound a little bit maybe like I was traveling 3 weeks out of 4, which is not true, but I do take trips at a time, and I will tell you, I think they're extremely useful in terms of selling the city, but I would rely more for you to talk to people who have been on the trips as part of these business delegations than me. I certainly try to work hard to promote the city, but I can tell you that when you are out there, they know about the city in broad brush strokes. They know about the fact that we're a financial center of, you know, of some considerable significance. They know about our life sciences businesses. They know various things about us. But what they know best is how we live together here. They all know something about that. And they don't know it in depth, but they just know there is a narrative being written here in this city that has more to do with open hearts and open minds, and over and over again, and that is fundamentally important to our reputation. It's what has led to, and I don't know, Anne, what your figures are, but I know at the University of Toronto president told me just last week, I think, that his U.S. applications are up 50% and out of country 70% or something, and it's because people are looking at Canada, and, you know, they know we're not perfect. I mean, today is, as it's called at the moment, I think it's going to change, but it's called National Aboriginal Day. And we had a wonderful ceremony up at Nathan Phillips Square at 5:30 this morning. I'm not sure I recommend that part to you, but it was wonderful. And it was interesting because here you sit in the middle of the fourth biggest city in North America, and it's serene and quiet at that hour of the morning, but you feel the power and the energy of the city around you. And we're there commemorating the contribution and showing our respect for our Indigenous peoples. And, you know, we don't have a very proud record there. But having said all that, our record everywhere else leads me to believe we can apply ourselves to the challenges facing the Aboriginal peoples, but that's part of what the world is watching when it comes to Toronto. They know there are lots of smart people here. They know there are lots of successful businesses here. And that's what attracts them as well, is obviously the opportunity. They know we've got a fabulous educational system. But what they're really looking for is the underlying values they think are different here. And I'm not saying they're better, I'm just saying they're different, and they know they're different, and I think it's a big plus, and I think the partnership and the collaboration we can show between labor and business is a big part of that. And I congratulate the Board of Trade for that as well. I'm up here, and my City Council colleagues were already introduced, so I won't introduce them again. I will say that even I found it unusual that there was a report from the podium that the Budget Chair, Gary Crawford, and the Deputy Mayor, Denzel Menenwong, were both smiling. This doesn't happen often, especially when they're sitting together, but especially when the budget chief is involved, but I will not go any further on that. I do want to talk to you today because I think it is a really important subject, certainly based on the amount that I hear from people about transportation and traffic, and it is something that I said was going to be a top priority of mine when I sought this office. And I've tried to make it that. It's very difficult because I have no magic wand I can wave that sort of says that traffic is going to disappear. But it's a fundamentally important issue, every perspective you could name. I mean, it's an economic issue because, of course, the congestion problems we face as a city, and many big cities do, affects our productivity. It's a family issue. I think we all know that just from the standpoint of how much time people spend away from homes and in their cars when they would rather be at home with their families. It's an environmental issue. I mean, if we're going to be successful, and we've got a plan going to City Council in 10 days to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which we should do as a city. I mean, just cleaning up the environment here when we can is something that just makes sense. A lot of the steps that we can take to clean up the environment and reduce greenhouse gas emissions will have the added benefit of saving us money for energy inefficient buildings, just to cite an example. But so it's an issue on a number of fronts, and it's something that I'm trying hard to address. And, you know, we're really talking about something as basic as the ability of people in Canada's largest city and our economic engine to be able to get to places on time, to move about, to deliver things, to go to work, to come home, and to just get around the city. I met a group of venture capitalists visiting Toronto to look at investing in our technology sector not that long ago. And one of them told me that he was bullish on Toronto because he thought we had the opportunity to avoid making the mistakes made by other cities. And I think that is partly true, that we still have the opportunity, in part because we're a younger city, and in part because we're willing to accept change. And one of the pleas that I'm going to make to you today is to be open-minded about some of the changes that we're going to have to make in the city as we get further and further into the 21st century. Cities are where it's at these days, and I say that not in a self-serving way. I was at a conference in Montreal yesterday with our Prime Minister and the Mayor of Montreal and 100 other mayors, including the Mayor of Chicago, and it was discussed that in this country, now blessedly 150 years old, when it was born in 1867, 20% of the people lived in cities and 80% lived in what might be described as more rural and smaller communities. And today, 80% of the people in Canada live in cities, including this, the biggest city, and the only one of its size and complexity in the country. And I don't think, and it's a sidebar I won't get off into, that our constitutional arrangements and the way governments work together necessarily reflect the reality of who it is that is called upon to resettle refugees or to build and operate transit or to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through making buildings more energy efficient. And on the list goes. Cities are the place today, and frankly, it's the economic unit that is the one most likely to be attracting investment to Toronto as opposed to Ontario. Or to Calgary or to Vancouver, for that matter. It's cities that are doing a lot of this, and people want to live in these cities. It's where the action is. You know, because the people in this room reflect a trend that is going exactly the opposite way from what we faced 20 or 30 years ago, when jobs were moving out of the core and into the suburban areas, even right out of the 416 to 905. And now, based on the visits to my office and the experience you in this room have, people are coming back the other way. Why? Because their employees want to live downtown, and that's why the growth is taking place downtown. And again, a little, sort of discussed fact that the population of the downtown has gone now to 250,000 and is heading to 500,000, just based on plans that are sort of on the books, as it were. The challenge is, how are we going to cope with that? Because I think we've been less than exemplary at making sure that the decisions that were approved to allow for development, to accommodate growth, quite frankly, so there had to be development, have been accompanied on a concurrent basis by the kind of infrastructure that we need to move people around, to provide people with electric power and clean water and all the different things that we have a responsibility to do. So we're trying to remedy that, and one of the things we're trying to remedy is the traffic situation. And of course, the first and foremost way in which we're going to do that is by building public transportation, because to give people the public transportation option, which they often weren't given in the past, is something that is going to cause people to make the decision, which is a hugely beneficial financial decision if you really think about, the all-in cost of having and driving a car around the city. It's huge compared to what some complain is the excessive cost of traveling on public transport, but it's a deal compared to the cost of driving a car. People often don't think about the full cost of doing that each and every day. I wanted to just share with you, I sort of said when we were talking about the speech among my team in the office the other day that I joked with them about calling the speech stuff that wasn't happening before, but I didn't use the word stuff. But I'm going to go through that stuff with you because I think it's just important that you understand, especially the people in this room, as I then will move to talk to you about some things that are going to require some understanding on your part and support, some of the things we have tried to do, which I put in the category of being business-like, sensible things that are designed to move people. And they're in no particular order. We established, and this would seem like common sense to you, but it didn't exist before, we established for the first time a road closures coordination committee, because one of the complaints I heard and experienced as a Torontonian was, well, you either close all the roads at the same time for construction in parallel north-south streets, or you have events that close 3 streets at a time and so on. Has this organization achieved perfection? No, we haven't. Especially in this month, I will tell you, the month of June is the hardest month because everybody wants to have their events in June before the summer comes, the weather is nice, and so on and so forth. But we have actually moved runs, out of their date and out of their place and said you have to go somewhere else. We've done it. We have changed construction dates. We've moved subway closures off given dates in conjunction with the baseball schedule. And these are things where you'd say, well, so what? A big deal. But the fact is that I think had we not done that, the situation I know you all find still not acceptable, and I don't find it acceptable either, would be even worse. So we're doing that, and we've accelerated construction projects. It's something that I'll come back to. And I think the real point here is this kind of a group didn't exist before. You have every single department of the city arrayed around the table, the police, the TTC, the construction people, and so on, and the meetings are chaired by and accountable to me. Secondly, increased enforcement. With the cooperation of Chief Saunders, he has added 60 extra officers to patrol the morning rush hour and 70 more in the evening. And I think it is making a difference. I can tell you that it's certainly making a difference to the 29,000 people whose cars have been towed away, since I took office. And that is something that I made no bones about because I just felt that it was inconsiderate and worse, that people could see clearly marked signs that had been there for decades, but there were no consequences to saying I'm just going into Tim's to get a coffee, or I'm just picking up my dry cleaning, or dropping off an envelope. And in the meantime, hundreds of people were inconvenienced in the process. 35 additional traffic cameras have been installed in 2016, bringing the total number to 234. There are people who have some problems with cameras, and they think cameras are, kind of invading every area of our lives. And in some respects, I think if people knew all the different places there are cameras, like on all the bank machines and so on, they might be disconcerted about that. But the fact is, when it comes to traffic cameras, they all send their signals into a traffic control center in the east end of the city, and they're actually able to watch those cameras and see things happening right in front of their eyes, and then take action to call police or do other things. They can even now change the timing of signals from the traffic control center, so if there's a problem, they can change the timing of the signals to accommodate that sort of thing, which is consistent with the kind of technology that is increasingly becoming available. Speaking of traffic signals, 357 intersections were retimed in 2016, meaning that the traffic signals were retimed in conjunction with the actual traffic patterns. Another 281 intersections will be done this year. It doesn't sound like a lot, but each one takes a period of time to do, and we're doing them slowly but surely, and that's out of a total of several thousand. So we're making progress on it, but it is a painstaking job. In 32 intersections this year, we will install technology, which I'll come back to, which reads traffic flows itself and actually then changes its own programming depending on what's going on with the traffic. And I'll deal with it right now. We're actually procuring that on a new basis, and I think it's the kind of way we're going to have to procure things going forward, instead of just putting it out for bids and having the lowest bidder win, and that's what happens. And those rules were put in place from past episodes that happened in the city government before my time. But we're now moving to say we're going to have 5 vendors actually put their technology in different intersections across the city. We will have a real live test of how it actually works, and then make a determination of who wins, and the best technology, truly the best and most effective technology, will be the one picked to be expanded throughout the course of the city. 32 road construction projects have been accelerated, with premiums being paid of up to 20%. And this was something that I said on your behalf, and I think you agree with me from the comments that I've had, when I said we would pay up to 20% more. And again, we measure each one on its own merits, but we would pay up to 20% more to have a substantial speed up in this work getting done. the support that I've had from taxpayers and citizens of the city has been demonstrable in terms of people saying, yes, that's the right thing to do in a business-like context in order to minimize the hurt to the hurt to families, the loss of productivity and personal time. The Wellington Street project, which I'm sure many people in this room would love to hate, and again, I will make no apologies for that work being done. I will tell you we went for years in this city postponing those things, to the point where you had water mains and sewer pipes and streetcar tracks and road beds that were way past the time when they should have been replaced in the best interest of just what's business-like management. And we're now doing those projects. And the good news is on Wellington Street we're doing them all at once. So the reason it's so disruptive as a project is because the water mains and the sewer pipes and the streetcar tracks and the road bed are all being fixed at the same time. When I saw the chaos that resulted from the initial closure, my office called together our excellent city staff and the contractor, and as you would expect when you ask people, especially from the private sector, for their ingenuity on how they could speed that project up, they've sped it up by several months now. How did they do that? For the first time ever, work on waterworks underground is being done at night, and they're lighting it up and they're doing it.